So we normally use append method to append custom attributes to our models. Now, we always do that actually when we want to have an attribute, a custom attribute that does not exist in our database. So you have a table, like in my case, I will be using a table which has got a street and a country. And I want to have a custom attribute called address, and I will derive that from the street and country. Not a good example so much, but it gets the job done. And I trust that you will understand what's going on. Okay, so in order to do this, looking at my screen here, I have this simple page which displays a list of users in a grid format. Now, if someone visits this URI, then we obviously go to the route section here, and you can see I have mapped this to a user controller as index method, like so. And in here, I'm just getting all the users and I'm passing them down to the view. Looking at the view now, I'm just looping the users, and if you can see here, I'm displaying the street and the name. So if you refresh, like so, then you get the username and the street where they are coming from. Now, if I wanted to have an address here instead of a street, so I like programming in a wishful thinking. I wish to have an address attribute in the user's model, but this address attribute does not exist. So I wish to have an address. So I type an address, and then after that, I will come to the model and create a function. And this function should be called get address attribute. And this actually is a formula. You have to precede the attribute with a get and an attribute keywords. So these keywords make this function a getter method. So to get an address, I could return this street, and I can also append with a comma there this country. So this street is an attribute in my database. If you look at my table here, you will find that I have this column called street and this column called country. Okay, so these two columns, I am concatenating them here and formulating a new attribute called address, which does not exist in the database, but of course I am creating it on the fly and I can access it from the model. Okay, so there we go. And now in here I have this address. If now I go back and refresh, you will see that I have a street, comma, country, which I have decided to call it an address for some reasons. Now this is fine because we are running this on Blade, which has got access to the Eloquent object itself. It can run the accessor method on the fly when we are displaying it, like here. So what if we want to pass the users array? For example, if you look at this controller here, we're just getting the users, all of the users, and you're passing them to the view. Now, if the consumer of this data is an API, that API won't have access to the user model. So we have to do this conversion before we pass the data down to the consumer. Okay, so we will do that by, if you look at data right now, and you say users, if we were to dump this, like so, let us convert this to an array. If we look at it, then for each user, you will see we have street, country. We do not have anything called address here. Now, what if we want to append an address there? Then, so what we would normally do in previous versions is go through each of the objects of the returned array and append individual address attribute to individual arrays. So we would do something like this. Let us access the users, like so. And we can access each user, and for each user we will execute a callback that accepts an individual user, and also for each individual user we execute the append method, which specifies the address as the custom attribute to be appended to the object itself. Now, by doing this, we are executing this append method to each user which exists in this users array. And by doing so, if we were to go back and reload, now we have an address key appended, just as if it were coming from the database. You see, now this is probably what you already know. Now, what you didn't know might be this one here. In the latest versions of Laravel, you could do something like this. Instead of going through everything and appending the each function, when you invoke the all method like this, or the get method, you are actually returning a collection of eloquent models. Now, you can actually execute the append method on the collection. It will just do the trick. So if I go back and reload, you can see that we still have the address, but now our code is much simpler. We have not yet invoked the each method which iterates through the array. So that was it for this video. You now know how to use the append method, and you know that in the latest versions of Laravel, you can chain the append method directly after the get method or the all method on your eloquent collections. If you haven't subscribed, what are you doing? Hit subscribe, and I will surely catch you on the next one. Bye.